So it's been a while since I made a Bottleman video, like 9 months at this point, but I had a topic that I wanted to talk about, so here we are. It's technically a topic I've talked about quite a while ago, that being dual type cores in Bottleman, but that video was made before GodCap even came out, so I feel like there's more to say at this point. Before I actually get to dual type cores though, I want to talk about the prototype system a little bit, and how these tended to work a little bit differently than what you'd expect. So starting off here we have Aqua Sports and Rising Milk. These are two speed types that have magazines, however, rather than just having ports on the core somewhere, just in general for all of the Bottlemen in the system, they did things a little bit differently. First though, Aqua Sports has these arms here, which attach to the magazine, which is very odd. And then Rising Milk, this thing is just weird, because the magazine does kind of attach to the core. It's made a little bit differently. It also works on Fusion Black, but with that, it needs its leg pieces of all things, and that's for the Blend Dragon fusions. This thing's just really, really strange. At least the Aqua Sports magazine's a bit more straightforward, just the arms, and it also works on Dual Gold's arms as well. There's also Samet's. This doesn't actually have a magazine, but the arms here do taper back a bit to give it a second cap capacity. So it's kind of like a magazine, but not entirely, but again, it is based on the arms. Then moving on to control types with barrels. We only had one actual barrel, sorry, Gyokroc, that coming out in Skull Pistol, and this barrel is actually attached via the feet, which is certainly a decision. The prototype Bottlemen were very odd. There was zero consistency anywhere. There were no generalized pieces. Everything was just odd. Like, you could actually have a magazine and a barrel via the arms and legs on a power type core if you wanted to, but then, for example, you can't use Cecilion's gimmick with a barrel, which you think should work, but no, because it's attached via the feet, you can't. Again, it's just really weird. There's zero consistency here. You can't pair two control gimmicks together that probably should be paired together, yet you can have a power core with a magazine and a barrel. It was very odd. So coming into Bottleman DX, they decided to actually standardize everything and allow for more universal parts. Kind of. So Bottleman DX had an entirely new style of cores. With these, power types just could not use any attachments. Speed types would have one port for magazines, with control types having their port for barrels. It's a fairly reasonable system, though it is extremely restrictive. I know a lot of people did not like this and still don't like this. Others thought it's fair enough for balance, though I don't really think it is, because speed types just kind of win most of the time anyway, because capacity is really the best thing in Bottleman, and it's hard to argue with that. I think power types do have some relevancy, like hey, Bottleman is actually just strong enough that could be something, but I do think control types tend to struggle kind of badly. But anyway, this is the setup we had for Bottleman DX, and it's kind of what we had throughout most of it until close to the very end of it. So this brings us to Random Collection Volume 2, where dual type cores were first introduced. So two of these weren't really all that impactful. You had Valhas DX, which had roller hold parts, of course being a speed type in that sense, but also a barrel port instead of a magazine port, and then you had the inverse here with Bottle Wyvern DX, having a magazine port but with control type hold parts. Again, this really isn't impactful at all. Like, this is just a slightly different control type, this is just a slightly different speed type. The hold parts don't make a huge difference in this sense, so they kind of just exist. The two that actually got some attention from this random collection were these two. The blue version of Earth Roller DX, and then the red version of Arrow Setter DX. So Earth Roller has power type hold parts with the dry strip in there, but also a barrel port. This basically just means that you get a stronger control type. You can argue that the control is slightly worse, but having that power control hybrid is still somewhat useful. But the big one is of course Arrow Setter, having the same power type hold parts with a dry strip in there, but instead of a barrel port, you have a magazine port. Power and speed, or a better way to describe it, a power type with capacity. Like I said earlier, capacity kind of means everything, but a strong enough Bottleman can at least compete, and this just takes both of those and puts them together. I'm pretty sure I talked about Red Arrow Setter more than like half of the mainline Bottleman. This thing was really relevant, and even by the end of Bottleman is arguably the best core in the game. GodCap had a lot of issues with quality control. The hold parts were just not really as good. So because of that, this is still a DX made product and functions very, very well. Speaking of GodCap though, it is still worth noting the core changes that came from that line. So in Bottleman DX, the cores were mainly just one part, though triggers were detachable. However, in GodCap, triggers were reintegrated into the core, however the core is now split in half. So basically, the back half of the cores, which is where magazine ports were, can now be attached to the front halves, which is where power type hold parts are. Again, I don't think GodCap was all that good with its quality control, meaning that generally Red Arrow Setter was still preferable, but in theory, you could basically just do the same thing. There's also something like Kokoryu OG, which has power type hold parts, a barrel port, and a magazine port just built in. It is basically a perfect core. So yeah, by this point, they were kind of just willing to do whatever. So we went from cores without any ports, just relying on the other pieces to potentially allow for barrels, magazines, that kind of thing, to then having cores that did have ports, but they're standardized based on type, to then getting our dual type cores, the focus of the video, and then eventually we got just completely doing whatever I wanted. Was this a good thing? Yes and no. Like, obviously for the sake of customization, it's great. And I think they actually should have done this from the start. The reason I'm not sold on this, though, is because they didn't do it from the start. They set up these more restricted cores, and then you just kind of give up on the concept, meaning that a lot of those older cores just aren't nearly as good. Like, yes, if you want a pure speed type, you could use a pure speed type DX core, that's fine. But a lot of the time, just having that extra power with capacity is going to be preferable. So I find it kind of hard to justify. Like, it just feels like really, really bad power creep. So unfortunately, I think they should have just stuck to what they were doing initially. Yes, it'd be less customization, but at least most parts just don't get entirely outclassed from one single core. That said, if we go back to the start, I think there would have been a much, much better solution. While the prototype system probably just kind of is what it is, with the DX system, I think there should have been one port on every single core for both a magazine and a barrel. However, control types should have had 2 ports for barrels, while speed types had 2 ports for magazines. This is something that I mentioned a few years back in a really old Bottleman video, but had they done this, you could have had more specialized magazines and barrels for speed and control types. For example, CC Lands magazine. That could have 2 notches, requiring 2 ports, meaning that you could not use this on the power type or a control type, it had to be a speed type. But just standard magazines or barrels could be used on anything. I think something like a long magazine could still work for any type, but maybe that could be an alternate version of the long magazine that is modular, as DX had a lot of modular parts. That way power and control types could still get a 5-cat capacity, but speed types could just keep adding on an extra 4-cat capacity per magazine indefinitely if they wanted to. Again, they would have had to do this from the start of DX, but I think it would have made way more sense. Assuming they actually want to lock specific parts to specific types. Like, you could just have everything unrestricted if that's fine as well. I don't have an issue with that. It's just that they were clearly going for like a type dichotomy type of thing. And if you want to keep that while still allowing for, actual customization, also extra capacity since that's kind of necessary, then I think this would have been the best idea possible. But anyway, that's all I have to say. It's nice to do a Bottleman video every now and again, so hopefully we'll do another one at some point. I have a couple ideas, so we'll see when those happen. But anyway, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.